Well, you're an incredibly positive person, one of the most productive people I've ever had the privilege of knowing. And I do want to talk to you a little bit about like the Yankees cap you've got on, like the and your New York roots. Because when I referred to FUBU, I remember the first time I got exposed to FUBU was during that Gap commercial with LL Cool J, where he was just like, "For us, by us," and then I was so confused even in that day because I was like, wait a minute, did that guy just like advertise another clothing brand while he was in a video for the Gap?
There were a lot of people that were extremely confused when that happened. So the story goes that LL, he wore a baseball cap and he put "For Us, By Us" on the low in the Gap ad. And because he was frustrated, he felt the Gap wasn't really taking, they didn't respect hip hop. They didn't respect him. They just wanted to hire him to do this commercial. I think this reflects kind of what we're seeing going on where we talk about diversity and inclusion, because the Gap ended up spending $30 million airing that ad. And I remember us in the office looking at this going, at first, I mean, my mouth just dropped the first week. The second week, my mouth was still dropped. But by the 3.5 weeks in, I was like, these idiots don't know what they did, what's happening, because they didn't have anybody that represented the culture, whether of color or whether of music orientation in the company. So if you look at sometimes how diversity and inclusion is probably smart, to have a little bit of other opinions, because think about it. They spent $30 million airing FUBU ads. Now, I do have to give it up to the Gap. You know what they did after that? They did their analytics, right? And they realized that the target hit market they were trying to hit increased 300% because the kids thought they can get FUBU at the Gap. They go out and rerun the ad. And I got to tell you, they were brilliant for doing that. And I'm super happy that they did that as well.
That's an incredible story. So that was in the early 90s when you guys were still coming up. And one of the stories that you told me and that I got from your book was your first business was driving a van across Queens, I think it was, where you would just stop and people would get on. And how much money would they give you to get on the van?
$1 each. So in New York, we call them, you can either call them gypsy cabs or what they call them dollar vans. And they're heavily in Brooklyn and Queens, where we go up and down the bus route. And people hop on and hop off and give you $1. It was my business for a long period of time, but I worked for about 4 years doing that. And then I was just drained because even though I was making $300 a day, I was grossing $300 a day. I was probably netting $15 a day by the time I paid for all my beat up van, pay for the gas. And by the way, it's not legal if you don't have taxi and limousine commission issued plates. So I get one ticket from the Department of Transportation for picking up at a bus stop. That was $2,500. So that was a lesson I learned about the difference of grossing and netting, and how you should have all the right things in place to run a business, because if you don't, you can really hurt yourself.
So you went from driving back and forth, and during that time, I think you were starting to dabble in attire. Is that right? Like what, ski hats were some of your first products?
Yeah, it was my my couple of hats that I sold on on the corner, and then I would go and buy shirts and stuff with just characters on it, and then I would fill my van filled with, because I'd take the seats out of the van, and then I'd fill it filled with super soakers, and during the Greek Fest or picnic, I'd go down to Jones Beach and sell the super soakers to all the kids. So I was always trying to find a way to make a couple of bucks.
Well, FUBU ended up being this incredible leap of faith for your family, your mom. I think she mortgaged the house to get you the startup capital after she saw that the business had potential. What a freaking family, love, loyalty story that is. Because I feel like a lot of mothers would, wouldn't have had that kind of belief or confidence.
Yeah, mom had faith, man. She knew that I was working on the house as well. I was paying a lot of the bills at some time. She worked her jobs, I did, and we collectively put together. She wouldn't have necessarily given me the money just out of, a leap of faith, but I had $300,000 in orders, and I came home and I got turned down by 27 banks. Now, I rightfully so got turned down by 27 banks because I was not using the house as collateral, and I didn't know how, I didn't have financial intelligence. So I wasn't really filling out a loan application the way that it should be filled out. But she did say, this is all we have, this house. So let's mortgage the house. And then when you know, get the goods out, you put the money back in. As soon as you make the money, you put the money back in. And she went out and she got $100,000 loan on our house. And I have no idea because the house is worth 75. So till today, I haven't asked her what she did for the rest of the money. But I got to tell you, you know, shout out to moms. Moms are the ultimate entrepreneurs. They figure it out.
Well, shoot, man, I'm not sure those banks were right not giving you that loan if you had 300,000 in orders. And that's something I would love to see change, frankly. Like if there is an entrepreneur like you coming up and you have traction and are starting to get momentum, I mean, someone has to believe in your growth, I think. And, you know, you see all these, frankly, like TV commercials where the banks are all like, we're going to be a partner in your growth. You know, you'd like to see that play out for real. So this was around the time we were talking about where FUBU really took off, right?
I started FUBU in '89. I closed it 3 times from '89 to '92. Then I started again in '92 with my buddies. I would start getting public recognition around '95. And like '96, '97 is when I started. I got obviously my bigger manufacturing and distribution deal, and I got FUBU out to the market, and that's when it started to really hit around '97, '98.
Well, that's incredible, man. And so how big did the operation get? And when did you, for example, transition out of your home to like an office to a manufacturing facility and all the rest of it? Because that must have been an incredible time. You must have been still over your skis in a lot of ways, like figuring out, you know, like.
You know, I think it was the year '96. I had moved 3 times. Because my house, I turned my house into a factory. Then I got my deal. And I was now stationed in the Empire State Building. You know, the word was out that FUBU was making money, so I was fearful for my life. You know, back in the neighborhood, so I couldn't return back to that house. And then I moved my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. We just had a baby. I moved her to one place. I moved to Manhattan just for 4 months so I can be right there at the office, and then we moved like 2 more times. We finally got our house in Long Island, Sands Point, right around '98. I was in Asia, I was in Europe, and I was traveling most of the time in factories and stuff like that. My life was just a whirlwind, and we were right around '98. I think we started to do around $350 million annual sales, and it was a lot going on. You know, and in the apparel business, that's a great number, but it's not the biggest number. I mean, you could think, you know, people like Nike are doing 30 billion a year, you know, and Ralph Lauren probably 3 billion a year, but 350 million was a lot for me. You know, I told you I was working a van. I was netting $15 a day, so 350 million was quite over my skis.
Well, so you built this household name brand, and then I think a lot of these retailers are trying to get a piece of the action in different ways. FUBU is now featured in the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, which must be like a real point of pride. It's like, what the heck clothing brand makes it into the Smithsonian? And over time, I mean, that 350 million peak, I mean, you earned over 6 billion in global sales over all the years that FUBU was in operation. But I do have the sense that, you know, like you were learning as you were going. Like, what are like the giant lessons you took from that?
The big takeaways were that there are good and bad people. You know, I came from the streets, and I love this to make apparel for this new genre of music, and I was trying to escape the clutches of drug dealers and various other things I felt in the streets. But the reality is that when you have a lot of money flowing through systems, there's a lot of bad people too. They just don't come with a gun, they come with a pen, you know, so be careful. It also, lessons were trust your gut, because there may be a lot of things that look good on paper or a person that looks good in person, but if your gut tells you something and you can't necessarily articulate why you don't think you should do the deal or why it's not in the best interest, don't do it. You know, and I, you know, it always ends up, you know, you need to trust your gut. I think cockiness also comes into play when you are on top. Have a healthy paranoia, and the customers first. Don't get too cocky. Don't think that you know it all and or you can solve everything with money. You know, you know, that came with it. Also, to understand the diversity in your company, the diversity of gender and age and color and creed and beliefs, and to make sure there are experts in there. I didn't know this, but I didn't realize that for every 50 people, you probably need an HR person. So I became a shrink at the end of the day in my company because I wanted people to feel like there was an open door policy and you can speak to me at any time. But I can't be an expert in everything. I can't be an expert in the way to communicate with other adults in different genders and different idealisms.
Wow.
And you need people there because your team is that's your bread and butter, man. That's your bloodline, and you need to make sure that you are working just as hard and listening to these people that work just as hard for you, to make them feel comfortable. Because then, if you do that, they will bust their butt for you.